Talking about Charles Bronson today with my good friend Dave Regal. When I think back to when I met you, Dave, I just discovered some of the 80s Charles Bronson movies that came out at that time. The original Death Wish was released in 1974, but Death Wish 2 was in 1982. And yeah, Death Wish 3 came out in 1985, which is the year I would have met you at age 13. So what do you know or remember or think about when you hear the name Charles Bronson?
Oh, man, I remember something called The Mechanic, where he was like a hitman or something. In one of his movies, I remember my dad was a big fan of Charles Bronson. Well, my family was, my grandparents, and my dad was almost fixated on The Mechanic.
Yeah, I remember seeing previews for it, but I never actually saw it.
I have to
So he was actually a hitman in that?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I remember that and the Death Wish. I remember seeing Death Wish at a drive-in movie theater.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Which one?
Probably Silver Springs, if I had to guess.
Yeah, most likely. I was thinking
Mechanicsburg.
Yeah.
Because we lived in Colonial Park. Could have been Harrisburg.
Wait, Harrisburg driving?
Yeah, could have been that.
Where was that at? Harrisburg.
You know where that giant food store is on 22?
Oh, that's right. No, I remember that being out there now.
Right near Mountain Road.
I forgot about that. Wasn't it like Festival of Foods was put in there or something? And I think took its place, didn't it?
Yeah, I don't
and then
really
it turned into
recall.
Giant or something like that. Well, it wasn't until many years later, I mean, this is probably maybe 10 years ago, I realized he was actually born in Pennsylvania here. Charles Bronson was an actual Pennsylvania guy. So he was born Charles Buchinski on December 3rd, 1921. And I never even heard of Ehrenfeld. You know, when they talked about it, he was always associated with Pittsburgh, but I mean, Ehrenfeld, if you look at it on a map, it's pretty much central Pennsylvania. It is over 85 miles away from Pittsburgh. So I started digging into his story, finding out all I could about him. Traveled out to Ehrenfeld, tried to talk to some residents there. It was definitely interesting. I mean, it turns out that, you know, even though he escaped from that mine town, a lot of the people there in town don't actually think very highly of him. I guess they have an issue with him not ever, you know, coming back or contributing to the town. I mean, if you contrast that to Jimmy Stewart gave back to that town. You know, he moved back there. He contributed money to build infrastructure. I mean, they put a museum in for Jimmy Stewart that he helped. He contributed when they used his father's items from his father's store when it closed. He was a huge part of Indiana, Pennsylvania. But this whole Charles Bronson thing is very odd because I mean, it just seems like he didn't want to go back here. He didn't want to remember it or anything.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, the mine explosion, his dad stuck there in the mines. I mean, if I had those types of memories, I don't know what I would think. You know, I might want to just turn my back on my past.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because so this guy grew up in that town. All you could do in that town is work the mines. And he actually recalled, you know, years later about that explosion in 1927. I mean, he claims he was standing outside the mine when there was a giant explosion, the Ehrenfeld mine explosion in 1927. 4 miners were killed. His father was inside. He claimed he remembers standing outside that mine while they were trying to figure out whether his father was alive or not. His father did survive that. You know, there was an interview with Roger Ebert. He interviewed Charles Bronson, and Charles told him about losing his virginity when he was 5.5 years old to a 6-year-old.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was crazy.
That doesn't happen.
No, so he talks about, you know, really never having his virginity. And he recalls this being the summer before school started for him at some 4th of July party. He said the miners were striking that year. So he would have been 5.5, 6 years old right in 1927. So I did find newspaper articles that show that after this mine exploded, the miners were striking because of the conditions there. So I think that's what he's actually talking about, is that period right after the explosion. But he said they had to move in with another family's house because everybody was on strike, and they ended up living in the basement, him and all of his brothers and sisters. You know, most of the memories he recalls is nothing but, you know, suffering. I mean, he talks about that they were so poor that he had to actually wear his sister's dress to school at some
What?
point. Yes. So
Charles Bronson wearing a dress on. Nah.
I know, I'm telling you, I think that's exactly why he didn't want to go back there. It was just bad memories for him. So when he was
guess.
11 years old, his father passed away. He lost him, and a lot of people were saying it's because of the, black lung and all that. But if you look at his death certificate, it indicates carcinoma of the stomach. Whether that is mine related, it doesn't sound like it is, but cancer of the stomach is what took his father out. So people that knew Bronson said that he basically withdrew inside himself and just wandered the woods of the area, didn't hang out with everybody. His friends at that point were saying they were still playing sports and softball and all that, and he didn't get involved. He just stayed to himself. But he had to then take over his father's place in the mines and began working in there with his brothers. Supposedly, he was the only one in the family to graduate high school, South Fork High School, class of 1940.
Was he working in the mine already at that point?
He worked in the mine between 1939 and 1943, and that's when he was drafted into World War II. So, yeah, he was drafted into World War II. He came down here to the New Cumberland Army Depot and enlisted, which looking into that was interesting. I see a lot of other famous people from the war enlisted there. Major Winters, from Band of Brothers fame.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, he enlisted in New Cumberland Army Depot 2 years prior to Charles Bronson. So Charles' brothers were also drafted and went in about the same time. So that was the interesting thing, is his brother Joseph enlisted with an address of South Fork, which I was able to find. If you watch the video, I found his address, and I'm not really sure what's going on there because his brother was born in 1914 in South Fork, but Charles was born in Ehrenfeld. So I'm not sure why Joseph, it appears he stayed in South Fork from his birth. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Huh.
Because that's the address he listed when he enlisted in the military in 1943. So
Yeah, I think a lot of times back then, man, a lot of kids they were like orphans and foster homes, and people couldn't afford to keep their kids. And
that's what I'm wondering. Yeah, was it a foster situation, or why did he stay there from birth? He never left South Fork. There's nothing showing that, the parents separated or anything. I mean, the father did pass away when Charles was 11. Because Charles was still listing that green address. So on his military records, you can see it's either a 626 or a 162 or 166. And apparently the addresses all changed there after the 911 standards were changed. So, but he still did list Ehrenfeld as his address in 1943, and his brother listed South Fork.
I've been out that way, where he's from, repossessing cars.
Yeah.
And I had a really tough time figuring out where places were.
It's an interesting
And that's
place.
what a lot of people said. Well, 911 came through and they changed all the addresses.
Yeah.
We would resort to going to the post office, or I've even gone to pizza shops
really?
and
Yeah,
talk
'cause
to
they know the
delivery
town,
guys
yeah.
because they know
Yeah.
they know where everyone lives,
Yeah.
But as far as being from his hometown, I've never actually seen it, but I've been not far from there.
That's the thing. I've been to Portage many times. Being from Altoona originally, we went to Portage, the Portage Railroad and everything up there for elementary school field trips. But just a couple miles further to the west is this cool little town of Ehrenfeld. It's really picturesque now. I mean, you saw the drone photos and video from it. It's a really cool little town and just still like a little mining town on the side of that hill. I ended up finding, she ended up being the niece of Tom Burns. And Tom Burns is what he was, the Cambria County Sheriff, but he was also Charles Buchinski's childhood friend, grew up with him. And he would actually return a couple times to see him. There was a newspaper article in 1981 showing them shaking hands at the Cambria County Courthouse. So he always would return to Tom Burns. But after meeting his niece, she told me crazy stories how Tom Burns told the story that they used to get on the Philly to box and train.
There's a story my uncle always told. I think it would be interesting.
Absolutely. Anything.
When they were in Philadelphia, they were going to the gym. They got up one morning and got dressed and were heading out to go work out, and they were walking down the street and a pretty girl passed by. And she turned and went into a building. And my Uncle Tom told us this all the time. He said, Charlie turned and said, "See you later, Tommy." And he followed her in the door. It was an acting studio. And that's where he learned his first acting lessons were at following a pretty girl down the street.
You might have boxed my dad
Well, was he going down there too?
all the time on the railroad. My grandfather worked for Pennsylvania Railroad between Harrisburg and Philadelphia.
Really?
And my dad and his brother had passes to get on the train and go anywhere they want. So Pop went to not just Philadelphia, but Brooklyn and boxed at the police athletic.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why he can always hold his hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Guys from back then are tough, man. That's how they got tough.
Yeah. That's interesting. You should ask him about that period.
I know. I
When was
never
your
even
dad
thought
born?
about my dad.
Yeah, when was he born?
He was born in 1940, so
Okay. Yeah.
that would have been probably 1950.
Okay. Well, it sounds...
50, early 50s, because he was
Well,
pretty young.
While he was in World War II, he fought in the Pacific Campaign. He was a gunner on a B-29 Superfortress.
Wow.
Yeah, he actually got injured and got a Purple Heart for one of his missions. He was discharged in 46, and in 47, he used the GI Bill to attend the Hushin, I think they pronounce it, School of Arts in Philadelphia. So he went back to Philly and started going to this art school down there because he was an artist. He could draw. That place actually closed just this year, August of 2023. But his first job in entertainment was to actually create sets for films and theater. He ended up renting a room with Jack Klugman. Yeah, so what was that? What's the...
Odd Couple, man.
Yeah, The Odd Couple, that's it, yeah. So Jack Klugman of The Odd Couple, he rented a room with him for a while they were going to acting school, taking acting classes down there. And he ended up meeting his first wife there, Harriet Tendler, at an acting school in Philly. He said his first date with her, he had 4 cents in his pocket, but...
4 cents.
Yeah. But she
Might have been a lot of money back then.
Yeah. What is his? Yeah, 47. So.
Get you a candy bar, baby.
But apparently her father was he ended up funding them to go out to California and try to get acting gigs and take acting classes out there. He paid for everything at that point.
The girl's father did?
Yeah, the girl's father.
Nice.
Yeah. So Harriet and Charles in 1948 moved to Pasadena and started attending acting classes at the Pasadena Playhouse. In 1949, Charles and Harriet married. And then
that puts him and my dad apart.
Yeah. Yeah,
He's getting married when my old man was 9 years old.
Well, yeah. So Bronson's first film was released in February 23rd of 1951. It was You're in the Navy Now. That's the first actual film that he played in. In 1953, he did House of Wax with Vincent Price. But in 1954, Buczynski changed his name to Bronson. And apparently that was due to the current, the second Red Scare, the whole blacklisting that was going on with McCarthyisms. He was concerned that he was going to be included in that whole, Russia communism scare thing. So he changed his name to Bronson. But in 1958, he started a TV series, a crime drama of a war veteran turned photographer / investigator. He starred in that for, I think, 2 years.
Man with the Camera.
Yeah, Man with a Camera was the first broadcast date was October 10th, 1958. But a year later, then he finally returned home. So he came home to Portage, where his mother was living at that time. And that was on November 12th, 1959. It was a family reunion in Portage. So that was the first time back. And he was a TV star at that point. In 1961, he filmed The Twilight Zone episode 2. It was really cool. It had what's her name from, what was the Bewitched girl? The heck is her name? She was the co-star.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, what is that? Let me look it up.
Elizabeth something. Man, I know very little about Charles Bronson. I'm surprised. I mean, I've been kind of loved the guy my whole life, just from the few things I have seen him.
Right, yeah.
I see all these films and stuff. I have to go back and try to watch some of these.
So the guy, he started in 57 films in his career. I mean, in the 70s was the peak of his career with all the Death Wish movies and, Cato's Land came out. But he was the highest grossing actor at that point in the 1970s at the peak of his career.
Wow. You didn't see anything on The Mechanic?
I saw it listed, but I mean...
You did see it listed. Okay, yeah. So I just want to make sure I was right about it.
Yeah, that's definitely Charles, yeah.
My pop used to talk about that all the time.
Yeah, I don't know what year that was, though.
'Cause it's not like a car mechanic. You know, it's
Right,
mechanic. Wasn't fixing. He was fixing stuff, all right,
Let me see when it was.
but not cars.
Right. So 72. So 1972 was the mechanic.
Wow.
Elizabeth Montgomery.
That was it.
She's the actress that starred with him in Twilight Zone 2. It must have been one of her first episodes because she looked really young in there.
She was the one that did the thing with her nose.
Yeah. Yeah, so 1965, then he divorced Harriet. And 1967, The Dirty Dozen was released. It was the sixth highest grossing film of 1967. Did you ever see that?
I never have. I think
so
I've seen
good.
parts of it.
Yeah.
Was like Lee Marvin and guys like that in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the tough guy, the man's man type.
Yeah, well, it was a bunch
film.
of prisoners, I guess, they were releasing to go on a special mission and stuff. But
Yeah, I think I have seen it actually,
it's
but
so
I
good.
think it's one of those that I always fell asleep
yeah.
because it was late at night.
Right, right.
Wasn't because
yeah.
it was boring or anything. I just
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is like Death Wish. You know, we weren't supposed to be watching that when that stuff came out, but we had to sneak around late at night to do it, or when we had babysitters or something like that. So 1967 was A Dirty Dozen, you know, huge grossing film of that year. Then the next year, on 5/18/1968, he would lose his mother. She actually passed away in Johnstown Memorial Hospital, but her address was still listed as Portage. And that's the one thing I don't understand. And I did ask Nancy that when I was there talking to her. I asked her, you know, why she thought that you saw that place. You know, I stopped by the apartment she was living at that he would visit because there's old social media posts for, I think it's Portage Historical Society, saying they remember when he used to visit there in the 80s, and there'd be like black cars parked out there and bodyguards.
but it says that she died in '68.
I'm sorry, yeah. No, you're right. I got that wrong. People were saying, I think the post might have been, no, that can't be right either. Yeah, let me recorrect that.
Yeah, the post was in the '80s.
That's not right.
Hold on.
Yeah, but I don't know when the posts were, but they were old. I mean, they must have been like, I was digging deep on this when I found these old social media posts.
MySpace.
So I don't know what it was, but there were comments about that historical apartment she was living at, called I guess the Portage House back in the day. But she was living in there while this dude was a movie star. So what's up with that? I mean, why did he leave his mother live in an apartment like that as a movie star? I don't understand what was going on there. You think he would have hooked her up with a huge house or something like that? You know what I mean?
He didn't help the town. He didn't even help his mom.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. Not only did he not help the town, he was like, you know, moms, you're on your own. So I don't know if there was beef there or something, or if they didn't really get
I think
along.
people from back then, man, they didn't want handouts. You know, I remember my grandparents, man. They didn't mind helping other people, but they didn't want to accept help because they didn't need it.
Yeah.
You know, maybe his mother was content.
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, the way Charles Bronson is, you know, how tough he is and everything, and the shit he went through, you know, maybe she just was she didn't want anything from him, you know. That's it. I thought about that too, but
I think you don't get tougher than guys like him, man.
yeah, exactly.
You know, that's like the epitome of toughness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Charles Bronson. That's what I always think of when I think of Charles Bronson. I think of leadership. I think of inspiration.
Yeah.
You know, things that, like when I want to change myself for the better, you know, I kind of look to
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
not necessarily just actors, but, you know, military man
Right.
or just, like I remember you told me before, you know, find somebody that you're inspired by and model yourself behaviors after that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. People with perseverance like that guy. I mean, that's huge. I mean, you saw the pictures of him when he was 54. I mean, that's insane.
It's amazing. The 20-year-old and the 50-something-year-old right beside each other, they look exactly the same.
I know, it's nuts.
It's just a little gray hair in the one. It's like, well, you wouldn't even know if you'd...
Yeah. But so that dude smoked his entire life. He was a smoker his entire life, stayed, you know, physically fit, it appeared, and he made it till 81. You know, he didn't pass away till his 80s. So he did get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1980. But talking about Death Wish, I don't know if you remember that 475 Wildy Magnum. I mean, I'll never forget him. You know, he was saying he was waiting on his friend Wildy to show up, and finally when it came, it turns out that gun was actually his personal gun.
Oh, wow.
And he wanted that to be featured in this movie because it's an actual rifle cartridge. He explains it in the movie, but it's a rifle cartridge and a handgun.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was his own actually his
I bet
personal.
you that'd be a hell of a thing to try to fire.
Yeah, exactly. So on 10/9/81, that's when he came back, visited Ehrenfeld, met up with his good friend Tom Burns, and that's when that photo of him shaking his hand at the Cambria County courthouse. So in 1984, Jill was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was only 48 years old.
Yeah, I always remember hearing she died young.
Yeah. It wasn't until 1986 he was interviewed and told the story. He was actually working on the film Act of Vengeance. I didn't see that one either. There's a bunch of films I need to
What
catch
was
up
the
with.
one? What?
Act of Vengeance, 1986.
Act of Vengeance.
Yeah, I don't know what that one is, but he recalled the mine explosion and with his father inside and him standing outside of it. That's the first time that came up that I could find.
I'm gonna have to watch that.
Yeah.
I want this list of movies.
Yeah,
I guess
know,
I could
yeah.
just Google
Yeah.
Charles Bronson movies.
Yeah. Yeah, but his adopted son then, he adopted 2 children, him and Jill. In 1989, one of them, Jason, died of an accidental drug overdose. I mean, it did emphasize accidental. But in 1990, then Jill Ireland died of breast cancer. She was cremated, and her ashes were actually placed in a cane. Charles kept that cane, and he was actually buried with it when he died in 2003. So on August 30th, 2003, Bronson died in Los Angeles. He was 81 years old, and he actually had that cane with her ashes in it buried with him in that grave. You know, what sucks is we were just up in Vermont like 4 weeks ago. We stayed at a cabin up in the woods in there, and beautiful mountains. The mountains and the fall foliage and everything was great. But the area we stayed, there was 0 hiking opportunities. But it turns out that we were like maybe 15 minutes away from his grave, and I didn't even know he was up there until I came back and started researching this. But apparently he bought a ranch at some point up there, and that's where they spend most of their summers, hanging out at this ranch, riding horses and stuff after his retirement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would have thought.
But yeah, he retired in 98. He had some hip surgery, only made it a couple years later, 2003. They said it was complications of pneumonia, so it wasn't even, I mean, whether that was cigarette related, I don't, I'm sure he had reduced lung capacity because of it, but still, like you said, to make it 81 years old, being a heavy smoker your entire life, that's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at some point, if you want to live, you got to quit. I think about my own father, 83 years old and smoked a pack a day since 1950 something.
Yeah.
Up until a little over 10 years ago. He's still alive. He's lucky.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, genetics, different people.
Yeah.
A little more predisposed to cancer.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's kind of interesting to go back to that, the way that people felt in his hometown, like he owed them something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of I don't think the guy owed him anything. I mean, get the heck out if you can get out, and if not, I don't know. Maybe
that's a good point, man. But so I thought back and forth about that because I was arguing against that he didn't like the town because he spoke about it so much. He talked about his raising. But I mean, honestly, I guess if you really look at the totality of what he was saying was that place sucked. Here's what I went through. But still at the same time, it built who he was, somebody who, a strong individual that could, overcome anything. So.
Yeah, but it didn't sound like he was very embraced. If he was wandering off in the woods, constantly spending time alone.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to put myself in the guy's shoes.
Yeah.
In that situation, I mean, well, if I wasn't really befriended in that town, I spent most of my time alone anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a little entitled thinking, maybe.
Yeah.
For them to think that he should come back and fund the town. And that's just because Jimmy Stewart did it.
That's exactly what it is. That's the contrast you hear because Indiana, PA is only northwest, I think, from there. But it's very close, and they parallel what Stewart did with the town out there compared to what he did. And yeah, you're right. It's not fair to compare the two. He got out, kind of seems like a lot of people resent the fact that he got out. But that's the thing. I mean, I've only seen him talk about wearing the dress once. He said he had to wear dresses to go to his sister's dresses to go to school. They were so poor. They shaved his head so he wouldn't get lice. He had to come home from school, take off his socks, give them to his brother so his brother could wear them into the mine. There was a lot of hard times and struggles going on.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
How crusty them socks would be.
Yeah.
I don't even want to wear my own socks
I know,
a couple
right?
days in a
I
row.
know. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough one to say, but it's just cool that he did come out of Pennsylvania. I mean, if you look at where they came from, his parents came from Lithuania originally. And if
Is
you
that,
look,
is that Russia?
yeah, it's just it's south of Russia. Let me see if I can bring it up here.
Because the name Chinsky, I was wondering if it was like Poland or Russian.
No, it's south of Russia. He spoke. So yeah, he actually spoke.
Ukrainian.
Supposedly, Charles Bronson spoke Russian only until he joined the military.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's right down there, just southwest
Oh, okay.
of Russia.
A lot of tough people come from that area.
Well, so apparently that was a coal mining place also, because his father's death certificate shows that he was born in Lithuania and worked there as a miner when they moved over here. He met Charles' mom, who was from Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, Schuylkill County.
Tamaqua.
Yeah, but she was also from Lithuania. So they, for some whatever reason, I don't know if that was like the hot mine at the time in Ehrenfeld, because there's so many of them up there. Even Portage was a mining town, but they ended up moving to Ehrenfeld and had Charles there. But yeah, Charles, I mean, he found a way out. You know, he got out of there after he joined the military. That's when he realized, you know, there was life outside of just that small town of Ehrenfeld. So he told a story about when he was back in town in 1972. He's on a Dick Cavett show and said that him and some friends robbed the mining company's store, hopped the train right there and took it 300 miles. He doesn't really say whether it's 300 miles west or 300 miles east. So I'm just curious where he ended up, because he ended up getting shot off the train by one of the railroad detectives. And he still has a scar in his upper left shoulder from that shot.
When I was a kid, I used to ride freight trains. In my hometown, a few other boys and myself, we robbed the company store. Took a freight train, and we got caught about 300 miles away, and I was shot off a boxcar.
How are you shot off a boxcar?
Well,
Railroad police?
A railroad policeman, detective. In those days, they received $2 for every man they caught in the freight yards. And the justice of the peace would receive $2 for sentencing. It was that kind of thing.
That's sort of a bounty.
He said he fired to get us to stop. He didn't mean to hit me.
Damn. He even got shot.
Yeah.
You can't kill Bronson. Cigarettes. Did he die of cancer?
Yeah, no, it was complications of pneumonia.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that could have been smoking related to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It might have been due to decreased lung capacity or
Cigarettes
something.
could kill him, but a bullet couldn't.
Yeah, but still at 81, I mean, pneumonia is going to get you.
He was just, in my life, he was just one of my heroes,
Yeah.
Of course a bullet couldn't kill him. It'd take a heck of a posse to take a guy like that down.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting life, but yeah, he's a Pennsylvania guy. So we have a couple actors in here in Pennsylvania. There's one that kind of parallels him. I don't know if you heard of Jack Palance, but he's also...
Jack Palance?
Yeah.
He's the guy from, what was that show called? I always called him Jack Palance.
It might even be pronounced like that for all I
What's
know.
that, Ripley's Believe It or Not?
Is that him?
Isn't that him?
Is
Yeah,
that
I
him?
think so.
Let me look it up. Ripley's...
Yeah,
Really?
he always played some scary dude and
Right, yeah.
like some scary dude in the neighborhood. I think back in the day, man.
Oh, that is him. 1982. Ripley's Believe It or Not, Jack Palance.
Yeah, man.
Didn't know that. I didn't realize that.
He's from PA?
He's from Pennsylvania, man. He's another Schuylkill County guy. I believe it's Schuylkill, yeah.
Schuylkill.
Schuylkill, yeah.
They call it Schuylkill.
The Scoop. Latimer Mines.
Latimer. You ever heard of Latimer?
So Luzerne County, Latimer Mines. So Palance, I just remember him from all the cowboy movies and the westerns, from back in the day.
I'm not a Western guy so much.
Yeah. I completely forgot about Ripley's. That's crazy.
That's where I remember him in some stuff since then.
Yeah.
Like really obscure, odd type character roles and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, yes, he was a similar deal. He grew up in a coal mining town. I don't know if you ever worked the coal mines. And then you got Jimmy Stewart, obviously. But yeah, I definitely got to hit him up next. See what's going on up
Minersville. Oh, right beside Minersville.
there. Yeah. Well, yeah, that wraps it up for that. So that is the story of Charles Bronson in Pennsylvania. I call it Bronson's escape from the mines of Ehrenfeld.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad experience for him. Anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to see video versions of this podcast, check out my YouTube channel, Running Into History. And stay tuned for more stories of our forgotten past.